the few who might tune in later and don't know you, because you are somewhat of an international celebrity in the medical device regulatory world. Who are you? What do you do?
Bassil Akra is my name, and happy to be with you here today, Joe. What I do is I'm actually a consultant helping now medical device in the vitro diagnostic industry, understanding the European legislation. How I can do that, why I'm a consultant, because I spend time at the biggest notified bodies, and I learned a lot about the requirement in the EU, and I have been involved in developing the guidance document with as representative of notified bodies, and supported the various certification in the EU and also the implementation of the regulation by helping understanding how to read the regulation, how to understand it, how to implement it for the notified body part. And now I'm doing this also for manufacturers.
Very nice. And you've already taught me something just now, that I've been saying your name wrong all this time. It's Bassil, not Bassil.
It is.
Whatever you want, I know.
Yeah, you can use whatever you prefer, but Bassil is the fact because it's actually due to my combination of let's say culture, because my mom was a Greek background, and this is coming from Basilios. This is why it's Bassil.
I don't know what Basilios is.
Yeah, we can talk about that separately. It was a beer one day.
I'd like that. Well, perhaps if you were able to join us at 10X in May, that could be a fitting time. I would like that very much.
Yes.
Okay, notified bodies, very scarce. People who don't have one are kind of out of luck, right?
It is getting scary situation, because in the past, notified bodies were running after applicants to get their customers. Now you don't find any more notified bodies, and they are getting like a special place to go. You know, like when you are trying to visit a special restaurant and you need to pre-book
a reservation,
yeah,
in advance.
Yeah, advance, and you need to be a preferred customer to be able to get there. This is what is happening at this moment. So in 2012 we had like 83 notified bodies, and today we have 25. And they are overloaded, and this is becoming really a big issue for industry, considering also the fact that we have a time pressure, because it's not that you need the notified body one day, you need the notified body today, because your certificate is potentially under risk that it will not be extended in a timely manner. Then your market access will be influenced, because then you will not be able to place devices on the European market anymore. And the holistic timeline is till 2024. So we are talking about nearly two more years that you're going to be able to discuss still this situation to find a notified body. But actually, you need 18 months for the holistic certification. So we need to have a notified body as manufacturers today to be able to get on time the certification and ensure market continuity in the EU.
That leaves just 6 months to find one.
Yes, and this is very hard for a lot of manufacturers, because some of them are already working with notified bodies, but those were not designated for the new system. So we are talking about like 25 notified bodies are designated, additional 25 are the application process, but they are not designated by themselves, because we are not talking just about manufacturers who need to be certified. Also, notified bodies need to be enabled to take application of manufacturers, and just 50% of those who applied got now their application and their designation successfully. But those as well who are already designated are not coping with the works, because it's like a lot of work, a lot of new requirements. So they are still in the learning curve timeline and trying to understand how to implement it efficiently. And as you know, like every single life, when you start doing something for the first time and you have the clear recipe, you follow the recipe point by point, and you are very careful. And this is what is currently the situation. So it's taking much more time for the notified bodies to implement, and they are daily getting a new expectation, new requirements, which is leading to much more burden. Now, we have the other ones that are not designated yet, and they promise their customers we're going to be designated timely. But even if they got designated, let's say in the next year, mid of next year, they need to get all their customers ramped up to the new system before May 2024. And this is going to become really tough for the market, also for the notified bodies, unless they're going to have like fast, expedited processes with a lot of capacity, which is not possible because everyone is searching for resources, notified bodies, manufacturers, and this will lead to really problems at the end in the EU.
From 83 to 25, did they all drop off because of MDR? Or did some of them say, you know what, this isn't a profitable business, we're not doing a good job, we're out of business?
There are multiple reasons behind that. So when we had the 83 notified bodies at that time, this was the situation before the scandal happened in the EU. You remember in 2012, we spoke about the Bassil plant scandal, then the metal on metal. And as a reaction from the European Commission at that time, they initiated the so-called joint assessment. And then authorities were doing jointly with the Commission to audit notified bodies. And at that time, what they did, they identified a lot of notified bodies who are not able to show sufficient competency. And this led to a reduction of the notified body to nearly 60 notified bodies remaining. And from those 60 notified bodies, again, there were some additional measures over the time that some of them dropped also due to the higher requirement. But just few of them decided not to apply for the MDR because they said, we will not be able to fulfill those obligations. It's not because it's not profitable. I think it's a good, profitable business. It's a good opportunity for notified bodies, but you need to do a lot of activities, a lot of preparation, and you need to have the ability to invest towards being designated, because you need to keep in mind that the designation process for the notified body costs them at least 2 to 3 years investment to be able to start getting actually the return back by being able to deliver services. So even big organization like BSI, TÜV, if you remember, they applied the first notified bodies. When they applied, it was like the start of the regulation in 2017, 6 months after publication of the regulations, they were allowed to apply. So they applied, and both of them, they needed 1.5 years after application to be designated. And then they needed additional time to issue the first certificate. So you recognize how much like you name it in industry when you are developing a device, R&D time. It's like a kind of R&D time that they're gonna need to spend and invest to be able to get the designation, and then they can start getting the return back. Now, there was a newcomer who tried to apply and thought that they can do the investment. They applied and they wanted to get newly to the market as a notified body, and they recognized that they have to wait 2 years without doing business, because if they are not even a notified body and you apply, you are not allowed to do consultancy in parallel, because this is not allowed for notified bodies. So you need to apply and wait till the system will allow you to be designated, and then you can start getting your earnings. So you need to have organizations that are willing to do this investment and they see the potential. And we have enough of them that they are doing this, but it's costing a lot of time till they get the end point, which is the designation.
I'm, as you know, blessed with Michelle Lott's friendship. Yeah. And she's quite the MDR cheerleader and expert on this side of the pond when you're not here and when you are here. And I know that there was a lot, because this isn't my field. I know there's a lot of change. I've seen the spreadsheets and all the things that change as an outsider to knowing it so intimately. How can I think about this? Is it just, you know, there are more things you have to do, but to me, it's like a complexity of like your task got more difficult. I don't see how it's a 2-year process for me to figure out how to do, you know, again, I'm very simplified. I know how to do something in Excel, but now I must use macros. Okay, that's complex. I have to learn it, but 2 years and then you have to approve that I'm doing it. It just seems so much. 2 years of R&D for what I think is largely administrative. Forgive me, R&D regulatory people, if it's way more than administrative, but it feels that way to me.
Yeah, I mean, the time, what happens at this time? So the notified bodies first, they need to prepare a quality management system, which is reflecting what is written in the regulation. This can be done. I mean, you can do your gap assessment, you can implement a quality management system in a 6-month period, you can get everything ready. But the process of being designated, this is a tough process, because you develop everything, you prepare it, then you get audited by the Commission and the member state. And when you have a regulation, when you read through legal text every time, you have different interpretation, because if I give you a sentence, you read it, and I read the same sentence, and if it's written by a lawyer, both of us will believe that we understood what they mean, but actually the lawyer meant something different. So when the notified body applied, they prepared their system to their best knowledge based on the current regulation. Now they got audited, and then they got the surprise during the audit that the interpretation of the Commission and the member state is completely different for some specific topics. So they need to have like a CAPA and correction and so on. And this costs a lot of back and forward till you reach an agreement where they tell you, now you are addressing our expectation in the right way. And this costs a lot of time, because like you said, it's a lot of administrative steps and a lot of things which became not anymore reasonable. So I can give you an example that you can have a feeling about that. One of the topic which was actually the intention of the regulation was to ensure that notified bodies are involving competent people in the assessment of the various product, and competency not just related to regulatory quality, but also technical and clinical competency for those kind of devices. And how they check that, it wasn't sufficient for the commission or the member state to say, I check if you are involving, let's say, a clinician in the assessment of a heart valve prosthesis. I want to see that that clinician has that experience with heart valve prosthesis from that kind of heart valves, that he's able to assess it. So they went into the details. So as an example, you have a CV which is like 2-3 pages mentioning that you are then a cardiovascular surgeon was not sufficient. You needed to write down in your CV which device you have experience with and what is the evidence to support that you are actually able to assess it. So if you are a cardiovascular surgeon and you want to get a scope as a notified body for being able to assess suture, then the cardiovascular surgeon need to write a CV in that level of details, which gonna include all experience that this physician has actually with suture. This costs a lot of efforts by each resource that you do such a preparation, because you need to look back to your history and you believe you are a cardiovascular surgeon with a lot of expertise. This wasn't sufficient. So qualification was not alone sufficient. You need to have documented evidence. And this is like just one example out of hundreds of them where the administrative expectation raised up and it became really tough for notified bodies. This is on one side for the notified bodies, but you still have also the expectation on the manufacturers, which I didn't highlight yet because we are still talking about the notified bodies and why the process for designation is taking that long. But what you need to consider as well from a notified body point of view, that the commission and the member state were also still learning, and they are still learning about how to do it in the best way.
I want to ask you if you believe, I'm asking your opinion, do you believe that MDR will protect healthcare patients better than MDD?
If you want to get my opinion on this, and I think
your opinion
when I speak about MDR and in general, I think if notified bodies, all of them, did their work in a consistent and manner according to the MDD, and they followed what was written in the MDD, we didn't need the MDR. The point is that there were some notified bodies not doing their job according to the expectations. There were also some surveillance authorities not surveying their notified bodies in the right way. And therefore, now with the new regulation, we will not solve that problem because harmonization we are not achieving with it. And the MDR will not lead to safer devices. It will lead actually to reassessment of the current devices and putting higher scrutiny. You can do it also with the MDD, if you ensure that notified bodies are working consistently. And this wasn't the case. So I don't believe that the MDR will lead to safer devices. I think that the MDR are going to lead to a reduction of a lot of devices on the market because you are re-looking to your market at this moment. So you could do it also with the MDR. You could say, I tell you under MDD, I want you to re-evaluate what you have assessed in the past. I can say notified bodies, you need to put those expectations, and then we wouldn't need the MDR even. But they decided to have a new legislation because they wanted to address also the current state of the art for some additional aspects. And I don't think that we will have now devices which are better. We're going to have less devices, yes, but the same devices are moving to the MDR. So if a device had data in the past, now with the MDR, the same device will have just a new certificate and much more documentation. This is what we're going to have. And this is actually what a lot of people are missing. So we don't have an improvement in the healthcare system. We're going to reduce some devices and get rid of some devices which are not able to meet the new obligations.
Two things. One is because of, you get to know so many people, you can just remember a few things. In my mind, when I hear state of the art, I think Michelle, because she did this whole presentation about, what does state of the art mean? No, it's a whole thing. So we don't have time for that. I know. But the other thing that you just said was, I'm screaming inside saying, well, if the issue was people weren't doing their jobs properly, they weren't following MDD well enough, wasn't the solution policing and holding them to it versus let's change the rules? It seems so counterintuitive. Hey, I'm not the guy. There's a whole commission of really smart people who do this. They all came to this conclusion that we need to change the rules, that'll fix things, and let's make it really complex.
Yeah, the point is like, I fully agree with you. And I think with the initial step, what the commission did was this joint assessment, they reduced the number of notified bodies to the ones that are doing the job according to the rules. That's why this was the initial reduction from 83 or 86 to less than 60, which was a good step because then you got actually an increase on expectation. You need to take it from a legal point of view. So there was a need to update the regulation. So the regulation was not initiated just because of the scandal. The regulation was actually under preparation since 2008 because the European legislation need to be reviewed and revised on a regular basis. Now, the problem what happened due to this update, what you just mentioned, Joe, is actually that they included a lot of complexity without considering how would this complexity impact the healthcare system. Are we getting through that a better system? Are we getting better devices and safer devices? We are not, because the same devices will be approved again. And this is where they—
Sorry, say that again. Go back. The same
Yeah.
devices will be approved again. What does that mean?
Yeah, because we are with the MDR, we are not requiring that the device will be changed from its design. The device can move from MDD to MDR if the device meets a new requirement, which could be new testing or new evidence or challenging the evidence that are available with regard to their sufficiency, plus additional reporting, which are documentation on the device on itself. So you are not changing the device. So like, if you want to compare it, asking car industry to say there are cars which are old-timer on the market, and now you tell them you have to meet the new requirement, which is mentioning you need to have a navigation system integrated in your car. It wasn't designed for that. So the car still drive, the intended purpose is still achieved, and the old-timer is still okay. But they are now saying to you, you have to fulfill the new requirements. So you can adopt the car, you can include it inside it, but it will not make the car safer. It will include actually new obligations that I'm meeting. But the intended purpose is still the same. I can drive from A to B. And this is the point where we need to balance now. What is the benefit of the MDR? There is a benefit of the MDR, and I'm gonna give it to you to give you like some insight as well. The benefit is that due to this expectation on notified bodies to re-review a lot of their devices, I compare it to like moving from an old house to the new house. You had a lot of things in your cellar, you never look to them. When you try to move, you look to them and say, okay, I never need them, I throw them away. And this is what's going to happen now. So manufacturers are reducing their portfolio because they recognize they had like a huge number of devices which are not even used. Some of them, they tell me, we never sell those devices. They were in the portfolio because marketing is telling us we need them to have like a complete portfolio. This will lead to a benefit for manufacturer to relook through their house, reduce the portfolio to the number of devices that they would need. Notified bodies also, they're gonna do an assessment of manufacturers which potentially had a gap and they never saw the gap because they didn't do such a thorough review. Now they are doing this again. But it is not meaning that we have a bad system in the EU. Patients in the EU and patients are treated very well with the current MDD and IMDD system. We have a good healthcare system, and there is no issue that you would say you have a systematic issue that you need to have a new regulation with increased requirements because the patient in the EU are getting good treatment. So there is no healthcare issue. So I react with a new regulation if there is a healthcare issue and you are getting every second day a scandal with medical devices. This is not the case. We had single cases and the reaction was generalize and implement higher rules for everyone. And this is, I think, not a good thing by legislation, but we need to accept it and make the best out of it. And my recommendation always to legislators, we have now the regulation. The question is the regulation doable? Yes, it is. The question is, how can I implement it in a reasonable way by considering the patient at the end? And this is what is not happening at this moment because now people are applying administrative obligation and increasing the requirement in a way which doesn't make sense because they need to look to what is the patient need and prepare the expectation in that direction. And this is not happening. And this is why people are complaining about the MDR on its actually expectation.
I'm going to steal myself from asking you any more questions. And there's like a half dozen already for you. Instead, I'm going to ask you, with me being completely silent for at least 5 minutes, if I can do it, this is a test. Kevin asked, and I'm sure many who are on the call are here because they want to know, hey, I'm a manufacturer, I need a notified body, what do I do? That's the scarcity question that we set up as the premise of today's call. So I need an MDR, Bassil, can you help me?
Yeah, so I think the most important initial step, if I'm a manufacturer and I need now MDR certification, My recommendation is always to everyone, I need to prepare myself first. I need to have my quality management system, my documentation, MDR compliant. In parallel, I need to look to what is actually my product portfolio and which notified body would be able, based on their designation scope, to deliver me services. So I need to go through the notified bodies. I need to find, first of all, which one would be relevant for me. And then my recommendation then is to speak to those notified bodies. And I support a lot of manufacturers applying and speaking to the notified bodies, getting them, let's say, a slot in their planning to get them actually on the waiting list to be able to apply. And what is important in this period of time is actually to have a clear planning. So you need to know when your system is ready before you communicate with notified bodies. I had some manufacturer calling me and say, I need immediately a notified body, can you help me? And then when I asked them the question, is your quality management system and your technical documentation ready? He said, like, no, we plan to have them ready in 2024. It's like too late. If you have them in 2024 and you ask me now to help you, it doesn't make sense, because if I get you a notified body, I get you a slot. If I need to, you want to get your certificate on time, it will be too late. So we need to talk to the notified body and plan a slot, but we need to come also with clear timelines when we are ready, by considering also market continuity, because if you don't look at that, then you will find a notified body in 2024. It's not an issue, but your assessment will be done potentially in 2026. It will be finalized at that period. So you're going to have 2 years of time where you potentially don't have the ability to sell product in the EU anymore. So those are important considerations that every manufacturer should do. And also important is, I know that some manufacturers are potentially still waiting for the designation of their notified bodies, because they told them, we will be designated next year or in 1 month or 2 months. Don't wait. Evaluate the risk connected to that, because what is important, and I ask those notified bodies that say that, I go to a meeting with them, I say, did you apply to my scope? I need to understand which scope I need. And if they didn't apply, so I'm waiting for nothing. I had manufacturers saying, I'm waiting for my notified body. And when we asked them, your previous scope was wide, you could do stents, heart valve, breast implants, whatever. Now, did you apply for them for the new regulation? And if they say, no, we limited our scope, so we know that this notified body will not be able to serve us. Even if they're going to be designated, it doesn't mean that they're going to get the same scope. The second important point we need to understand also, that they got audited already, and that they got the conformity, the CAPA submitted to the commission, and that they got the feedback. Because if they don't get this, or if this is not done yet, it costs them at least 1 year to finalize those steps. So this will be an important evaluation to decide if we stay with this notified body or we go to a new one, because staying with that one, which is not designated for the moment, is a high risk, which I do not recommend. I recommend manufacturers then to search for a designated notified body and to reserve a slot, because you don't have an obligation to stay with the same notified body. You can even work with another notified body on MDR, and you have an MDD certificate with the current notified body.
Let me try this. I'm a brand new company, but I have impeccable QMS system and my technical documentation is perfect. Bassil, can you help me?
Yes, I can. So I look to what is your product scope and what is actually your need. We find which notified body is available for that scope.
But available means that they could actually accept my phone call, but they're too busy. I thought that's the problem.
No, the availability which I'm referring to is like availability of allowed to deal with those devices, because not every notified body is allowed to deal with those devices.
Right.
Then we select, it could be that we just find 2 or we find 3 notified bodies that are allowed.
Right.
Then we're going to speak with them and talk about their timelines if we can get a slot. Some of them, they still have slots for a new product coming to the market, and we can get that slot for that manufacturer. We need to speak to them and we need to agree on the timelines. Some of them are already not able to take any application till 2024 because they are fully loaded. But at least we need to initiate that discussion and we need to find which slots they have. I can't promise you that you would get a slot tomorrow. It will cost you potentially 6 months to start that assessment, sometimes with some notified bodies, but you need to do it immediately, because if you don't do it and you wait longer, notified bodies will not be able to take application, not because they don't want, but they don't have capacity. Why I say you need to start those too early, because a lot of manufacturers, and this is also one of the problems that happened during the implementation and the transition time, a lot of manufacturers planned to submit to the notified bodies, let's say in January, and the notified bodies may have suddenly a free slot because they do not submit. A lot of notified bodies, they have cancellation fee now because they recognize they planned all their time and manufacturers are not submitting because they are recognizing they will not be able to deliver the compliance documentation on time. And when you get such a situation from a project management perspective, what do you do as a notified body? You either push your project in advance, so the ones that were planned for February, they move to January, or you take a new project, which is coming in for the first time, and you put it in that slot. And this is what we can try when you have such a new impactful device that you want to get on the market.
So basically, cut the line when somebody wasn't ready.
Yeah.
It's like you get to the front of the cashier line. It's like, do you accept checks? And you're like, can I just swipe my card and go ahead of this person? Okay. All right. Before I look at the battery of questions, what else would be something that, okay, a scenario where I'm stuck with, or I used to use one of the 25 who thought, because somebody wrote, yeah, my notified body said they were going to be notified 2 years ago and they're still not. Now I'm scrambling and I'm desperate. And I have all of my technical documentation. I have my QMS system ready. Can you hook me up with one of the 3 out of the 25 that can handle my project? Is it again am I now competing against the brand new company? There's like a slot because somebody else was still writing a check in line kind of thing?
I mean, it's a fact of capacity availability. Yes, you are competing with who is available for you. Now, for some products and some notified bodies, I speak to some notified bodies, they have like workload on, for example, orthopedic area at this moment, but in cardiovasculars, they still have some capacity free. And we need to check, this is like products code specific, because they may have some teams that are free and that are able to deliver quick services. And for some other codes, it's overloaded. So this is like normal reality supply chain. You need to check that. You need to evaluate. You need to understand what we are referring to. We need to understand also the region which need to be served, because if you are a US manufacturer, you would need a notified body who's delivering services in the US as well, preferably with local resources that you don't have them flying in from Europe, because due to pandemics, they will not be able to come in. But this will delay also your process. So it would be much better to have local resources, designated notified bodies that are able to deal with this service, and they have still remaining free slots. Not all notified bodies are not able to take application at this moment. They take it, but we need to find the right one. And the right one, what I'm referring to, is actually the one which is still have some free time for you. And it's not in 2024, it is now in the next 2 years. And this one would be our partner with whom we want to work. And I suggest for such a manufacturer that you just explained that is waiting since 2 years for getting the notified body designated, don't wait longer, because 2 years means it is not running smoothly, and you don't know actually even if they're going to be designated for the full scope that you need as a manufacturer. So I would take always a plan B and try it at least to find another notified body, because you don't have, even with the same notified body, guarantees that they're going to take you quickly, because they may be designated. And we know from the experience, all notified bodies who got designated till now, when did they issue the first certificate? It took them 6 months towards, first of all, starting delivering services under the MDR. And then you started seeing certificate like after 1 year, 1.5 years. At the beginning, they were all of them highlighting in social media, we issued the first certificate. Now you don't hear anything about them anymore, because nobody talk about issuance of certificate. If you go to team notified bodies, so the Association for Notified Bodies, you recognize just few certificates were issued according to the new regulation, because it's a stuff, it's not that the notified bodies are not willing to do that. It is costing them a lot of efforts, and they are doing their best to deliver it, but it's costing more time than expected to be able to deliver all these services.
They say that when you major in economics, as I did many years ago, and time passes and you don't use it, all you remember is supply and demand. And that's pretty much all I remember. And I remember the part where if demand greatly exceeds supply, the price goes up.
Yeah.
I mean, are notified bodies just going nuts with chart? I mean, I'm going to, my alternative is being out of business, or I'll pay whatever it takes for this certification. Are rates extraordinary now?
Yeah, the rates are getting really high. And this is, you need to consider multiple factors. Notified bodies increase their rates because, like we said, the investment that they did was so high to be able to get designated. So if they spend 1.5 years to 2 years to get designated, they need to get the return for this R&D activities. The second point is as well, they need to increase the rate because they need more capacities. So if you look back to the notified bodies, even the ones that were now in the past big, now with the new regulation, you see that they are 3 or 4 times the size of what they were in the past, because they increase capacity. And this capacity increase is connected with a lot of education. If you got hired by a notified body, you have at least 1 year to 1.5 years of educational time where you are acting as a trainee. And this costs cost of production, cost of preparation will be then reflected in your fees. And based on that, the certification costs are going by 2 times to 3 times higher than it was under the old directive.
Let's look at some of the questions that we have. Well, okay, so Kevin wrote, I'll just read it out loud. I think we've addressed it. Can you comment on how the constraint affects those of us who are developing new products now and will not be ready to file until 24, 25? And I think you've adequately covered that. Then in the chat, we have Corey offers that prices are now similar to PMAs. Eddie writes, we are suffering from exactly the situation. Our notified body has been waiting for about 8 months. They were well established under MDD, but their delay is hurting us. Okay, in fact, not really. Luke writes, not much has changed from MDR to MDD, but it's gotten so much more strict. Competent authorities, test house producers, you've hit all of these things. I've also heard that competent bodies under MDR are required to have their auditors employed directly, while under MDD, they could work with or through consultants as subcontractors. This significantly increases NB's cost base. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, one point which we saw also in the last months is with the guidance documents coming out, where the Commission is trying to enforce this much more with the member states, is actually the fact of independency, impartiality of the services of notified bodies. So notified bodies were always required to be independent, impartial, and they should not be involved in consultancy. But therefore, they were actually, most of them, focusing on having internal resources. Some of them, they were using some external resources. Now, the expectation on you are still allowed to use external resources, but the expectation on this independency, impartiality from the regulation and the member states lead to the fact that if you are an expert in the field, you will not be able to act in that field. So it doesn't make sense to have an external anymore. So you would need to have internal to ensure that they are actually able to deliver services. And even if you are an internal, so if you are coming from a company A and you work for a notified body as an employee, you are not allowed to serve such a company for a dedicated period of time. You will be blocked just to ensure that you are independent, impartial. So this is a rule which is leading to much more internal resources. Even the internal resources of notified bodies. In the past, notified bodies, they had like one single auditor, which was able to do the various kind of technical documentation assessment. Now, those auditors were challenged also with regard to their competence, like I said, with the example of the cardiovascular surgeon, to deliver specific evidence for each scope which they are trying to act on. And this leads to the fact that in case of having one person assessing 3 types of devices, that you need for the 3 types of devices, 3 or more persons to be able to fulfill the requirement. And this makes the process very complex and very costly as well.
So I regret I cannot find at the ready a video that Michelle prepared, a cute little animation, but I have found the image of it. So I want to show it to you because back then I thought, oh, that's a cute idea. And now I'm really seeing how all of these points were so incredibly relevant. Let me share my screen. I don't know how well this is going to work because I'm on a single screen, but I think I can do this. This is a little sloppy. Let's see. So she compared it to Tinder, swiping right and swiping left. So should you ask, have you applied for MDR? If the answer is no, I can't use you. If the answer is yes, if you've had your joint, well, you know what, let me get Michelle on. That'll be better. Since I can't find the video, maybe she can, oh, for goodness sake, it makes it more difficult when I'm on one screen. Hi, Andre, you got here a little late, but glad to see you. Promote to panelist.
I think this is a good presentation of the fact that you need to consider the early preparation, and you need to understand that applying early doesn't mean for you as an organization that you will be successful directly, because the surprise will happen. Even big operation that believe that they are perfectly ready, they are hitting a wall because they recognize that actually their preparation is with a different understanding of the requirements that their notified bodies, and then they are getting questions which are leading to long delays because they saw that they have a harmonized view on the regulation, and they recognize the reality when they are conducting the conformity assessment with the involvement of the notified body, where the notified body going to say, no, you are completely wrong.
It was when we started talking about economics that made me remember this, because I remember this bottom part. I was like, really, that's a thing? Yeah. If you haven't hired enough people, I can't use you because of how big demand will be. Michelle?
Yeah, so, and this gets down to the heart of Bassil's whole title of his presentation about notified body capacity, because it's not just about capacity, but it's also about expertise. And then, like he said, the codes that they're qualified for. And I created this a couple of years ago, and you argued with me over the relevancy of this particular point. And now it's the most relevant of all the questions in this flow chart. But now we're past all this. Like, all right, we got to start at this capacity question and then go down from there. But now I have a whole list that I'm working on from that point. You know, after working with Bassil on a couple of presentations recently, you know, we've got to start adding in other qualifications. Like now, okay, if you say you're designated or you're close to getting designated, as many people on this call's notified body has told them, as I see in the chat, where are you? Like, has your CAPAS been submitted? Has your CAPAS been accepted? Because if they haven't been submitted, they haven't been accepted, I mean, how many more months out? Like at least 6, Bassil?
Yeah, at least. I mean, this is the reality, and the important is also how is your authority loaded with those kind of submissions, because the authority need to be also fast. And you recognize when you look to the designations that most of the designation happened in Italy and in Germany, and those authorities were actually overloaded because they had all of these notified bodies in parallel, and authorities didn't have an increase in capacities that they can do that smoothly. They are still dealing with the same capacity. And, you know, I mean, I compare it when you apply like for a new passport, or you apply for something which is actually an administrative reaction with the government. They don't care about timelines. They care, actually, they deliver it when they are done. This is how it runs. And this is what is happening there as well. So if the authorities is limited on capacity and they have application, but it's vacation time, they go on vacation. And then when they come back, they're going to deal with it.
Yeah. And so are you on the top or the bottom of the pile when they get back from vacation?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is what is actually what we are seeing. And for me, it's a typical sign. If you like the example which was in the chat, I'm waiting since 2 years for my notified body for getting designated. This is a bad sign, actually, because if I'm waiting that long, something is going wrong. So you need to have some clarification. What is actually the real situation? Some notified bodies said early, yeah, we got audited, but actually they were in the process of applying. So it's not 2 years, it's actually potentially 1 year, but they didn't tell you that because they are trying to secure their customers. They are afraid of losing their customers. And therefore, I highly recommend continuous communication with the notified bodies, clarification, transparency. And if you feel that there is here some hidden information, or you see a risk, my recommendation always plan B, and start your plan B early in the process. Nobody obliges you to stay with the same notified body. You have the flexibility to even if you have the notified body A today, that you apply to notified body C, because it's completely a new regulation. So you don't have to communicate with others and agree on the fact that you are moving to a new notified body.
So if I can just share a slide.
I found it. It's just so cute. I'm sorry. We like Michelle.
Thank you, Joe. We're gonna redo that whole video with the next set of questions.
Okay.
But let me share this because it's relevant to what Bassil's been talking about. This is like recently, as of October, released by the EU Commission. This is exactly what he's been talking about. Where are they in this designation? It's because there are only two, and recently one of them just came out of this cycle into Nando to make it 25. But like, this is where if they're not like in this final disposition phase, Bassil, how like we at best we've got what 4 more in the pipeline here that are reasonably close. How many months would you say it's going to take these 4 to get out of this final disposition MDCG recommendation?
I think looking to this, I do not expect them to come now before Christmas, so we will have them potentially till February next year.
Right.
So in February next year, we will have additional those additional 4 in total. But the point is, which is critical, we are already 5 years then after the initial publication of the regulation. After 5 years, all what we achieved, and this is a good learning for the calculation also for the industry, if we achieved after 5 years, just actually 50% of the applicants to be designated, how much will the notified bodies achieve till 2024 with regard to their customers? Because they are undergoing the same process. So manufacturers are undergoing the same process like notified body designation. So the process is taking 18 months to 2 years as well. And this 18 months to 2 years for every manufacturer all over the globe will lead actually to delays, and we potentially will be in 2026, 2027, still dealing with initial MDR certification for a ready available device on the market.
For those of you who say their notified bodies have been in the process for 2 years and have been telling them for at least 2 years that they're going to get their MDR certificate, ask specifically which phase of this review are you in, and if they say anything short of final report, like you need to start shopping immediately, because they're not going to get designated. And Bassil, didn't you say it's going to take, even if they did get designated, it's going to take another 3 to 6 months for them to have their internal processes in place to start taking applicants?
Yeah, I mean, it's like every manufacturer, you know it by yourself. When you get the certificate, you don't place on the next day product on the market. Then you start the activities to enroll, and those are the timelines that you need to consider. Notified bodies get designated. The first thing that you're going to see, they celebrate, they put on social media, finally MDR certified, everyone is happy, and then the next day they start crying how to do it now. So it is actually the reality check happen afterwards, and everyone will start looking on how we manage, how we start, and it is costing time based on the fact as well that they are still dealing with the old legislation, because they still have requirement for the old legislation where they need to deliver services towards their issued certificate, which is costing also their capacity. So this is not as easy as a lot of people believe. Even the Commission and the member state do not understand that notified bodies are doing their best to achieve what they are expected to do, but it is a tough process and the timeline is very limited. And the additional burden that they are having is that they're getting continuously new guidance documents. Every time they get a new guidance is influencing their process. So they finalize the process, they train their people. Then the week after they got a new definition or explanation, like the recent publication of the classification document, which say to them, oh, you certified a lot of active implantable medical device accessories as and classified them on their own, and you accepted this, what the manufacturer is doing. We disagree. They have to be classified in the highest risk class, repeat everything without any transition period, and then notified bodies need to redo the job that they have done with the same capacity. This is unbelievable because it will cost a lot of project attention and project management requirement and a lot of resources to correct an issue as well. So to do it from the beginning right, it's perfect, but to do it from the beginning in a way which you believe it's right, and then you get some feedback, everything that you did was wrong and you need to correct, correction cost is much higher.
Luke, you're on mute. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Want me to ask the question again? Hi, Bassil. I really liked all your presences at easymedicaldevice.com with Munir. And you have really a way to tell difficult problems in a really easy way. My question is, I was at Medica this year, and I talked to a lot of manufacturers, and they were also ignorant. They all thought that maybe mid-2023 or beginning 2024, they could apply for a recertification from MDD to MDR. So I foresee a massacre at the end of in May 2024. Don't you think that there will be a typical EU solution to this? Like they say, well, it is May 2024, but we don't enforce any restrictions for the upcoming time?
I will not count on it, because the problem that this was the belief, and we recognize, we saw the experience. I was still at the notified body when COVID pandemic situation started. And honestly, the commission gave this additional year, but they didn't give us an additional year. They gave it under really big pressure, political pressure, but it wasn't actually an additional year. It was actually a postponement of the work to a period of time, but the total timeline remains the same. And this is where a lot of people were like happy, wow, now the commission reacted positively to us. They didn't react positively, they added the burden. And this is what I fear. In 2024, if there is still a lot of manufacturers believing that something gonna happen toward helping them. And I think we should not think about how we can delay. We should look on how we can implement the MDR in a reasonable way. So if this is the interest of the commission, then they should simplify the process for notified bodies, simplify the transition from the old legislation to the new regulation. The timeline, what they are putting as an additional pressure is not a pressure, and notified bodies could be able to cope with it if they are not over expecting. Because at the beginning, we told all of us, like it was written in the chat, the MDR, it's not that big different to the MDD, you could manage.
Oh, is it?
But you need to be pragmatic in the way how you implement the requirement. And if you do out of the requirement an administrative way of assessment, and you do an assessment where you raise in every single review 80 to 200 questions, asking basic questions which are not necessary, just to impress that you are actually doing a critical assessment. And then you have authorities punishing notified bodies if they are not doing such a critical detailed review, then it is not moving forward. And then on the next day, you tell them what you have done is wrong, you have to repeat it, and you add complexity to the process, then the 2024 timeline will never be achieved. Now, to your point back, will it be a solution? I think every government, not just European Commission, the Commission doesn't have anything to do here anymore, because the member states need to react. At the end, if the patient will not be able to get his therapy, then the healthcare system would react, and then special solution will be given. But the point is,
but I guess then the problems arise a few months after May 24, and maybe half a year later, and then it's too late.
It's going to have to be the end user and the patient population that outcries, similar to like it was the PIP scandal. It was public pressure and political that like really accelerated. MDR was already being talked about, but it was all the political pressure that really pushed it to the forefront. And so it's going to be political pressure that's going to have to push it back.
Either that, or we need another Michelle campaign, like when you successfully got them to not declassify, downclassify.
That's the US.
It
works a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's only one FDA to campaign if they come up with some stupid regulation, whereas there's 7 member states plus all the free trade associations.
They have to make it so hard, and so hard, in fact, that Luke writes here that NBs are so desperate they even tried to get him as an employee, and he knows nothing of it.
So I had a client that's French, and they lost their RAQA person, and they were recruiting, and they had 3 candidates that they wanted to make an offer to, and they lost all 3 candidates to a notified body.
Yeah, notified bodies are hiring like crazy because they need to address the expectation and the market need. But the point is, even if they are hiring experts, they can't use them because they need to wait till they are educated and qualified, and this costs them 1 year to 1.5 years to get this qualification.
And all the good people like you, they run away.
Yeah.
That's right. Look at that. They could use you right now. I think you could probably get a job.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Eddie, you had something to say, and Michelle too, you wrote something in the comments about bullying. I'd like to get back to that. Eddie?
Hi, yeah, I'm trying to, so again, I'm the guy who was saying about they've been at least 8 months waiting for their approval. What I was told is that and it's one of the Italian notified bodies, that they submitted to the Ministry of Health, but of course, Italy, even in COVID summer, was slower than even normal. That has happened, and now I'm told that their application has been progressed to the EU for a final certification.
They send it to the EU, so they submitted to the member state. They applied.
Yeah.
And when they apply, the process is like this: you apply as a notified an organization who wants to be a notified body, you apply to the member state review your application, and this costs them a bit of time. And when they say you are actually able and to get designated, so this is the so-called preliminary remote assessment. So the preliminary assessment is done, then it goes to the commission, and the commission then plan with the member state an audit. So you are early in the stage, and from that time you can plan with additional 1 year at least to get designated.
Another year?
So
Yes.
what it sounds like from what you're saying and Bassil's interpreting is that your application is at best here.
Yeah.
And so you got a year to go. And
So-
and they've already been at it for 2 years.
So you
Any
need to ask
vacation
them
out in the
what-
States, we'd love to have you.
So you need to have that question to them to say, is it actually, did you get your audit? If they didn't get their audit yet, then you are still in the early evaluation phase. So then 1 year at least, if the audit goes well, because it could be that they got the audit and they say to them, sorry, rejected, you need to reapply later.
I feel as though I should take you off the screen because you look so sad. I'm going to take you off the screen.
He's in a
Thank you.
stage of grief.
You don't want to be on camera when you start crying.
MDR is nothing if it's not one of the stages of grief.
There are 6 stages now.
Is there?
Well, I would guess. I don't know where it would go in the stages. I
Well,
would think it's in the "you've got to be kidding me" stage, right?
yeah,
before.
we're bouncing forth between anger and denial.
You want to tell us about bullying?
Yeah, so back, when I was in industry, and even some of my clients now, like the marketing, business development, CEO types, like are used to bullying regulatory and like telling us when we can submit and what is adequate to submit, and that they have a product launch plan. So it's our job to get the product cleared before then, as if we have some kind of personal influence over FDA or a notified body. Well, MDR has just cut the knees out from underneath any kind of market or business development plans. And so when Bassil said that notified bodies are starting to charge fees for you having a spot and not being ready, that is largely a function of, marketing and business development used to telling us, oh, the sterilization validation's not ready yet. Turn it in without it. Tell them it's going to be a month from now, and that they're not going to be done with the review before the sterilization validation comes in anyway. So we'll just turn it in when it's ready.
Makes a lot of sense. I think of it as a cancellation fee.
Yeah. Well, but then you got to get back in line.
Yeah,
And
I know.
so it's a
fly
cost,
home, but-
and then it's extra time if you're not ready.
Yeah, and you are also adding burden to your notified body. So you need to consider that also both sides, they need to work together towards ensuring a lean process. You don't want to get complexity into the process. So if you plan and they dedicate for your resources, you need to make sure that you deliver on time. So this planning and replanning cost notified bodies a lot of capacities, a lot of resources. So make sure that you have a clear communication, you plan accordingly, you prepare yourself. Don't submit also documentation with the hope, let's see what they're going to say, and perhaps we're going to succeed. I had a lot of manufacturers who believed in the past we were always accepted because we are MDG certified. So to keep the slot, they submitted the MDG file. And the notified body got back to them and rejected the file and said, like, it's not in line with the requirement. So during validation steps, so you are pushed back in your timeline, because then you will come back and review, okay, how much time would I need to get this upgraded? And you will say perhaps 1 year or 2 years. And then the notified body will say, you don't have a slot now, apply when you're ready again.
Next week, Rob Packard will be our guest. I don't know, in the unlikely event you are free at this time next week, he's going to be talking about MDR as well in Canada. Are you as well versed there? Is it the same everywhere? I don't know.
I mean, the MDR has an application on various regions, especially also Asian regions, which are relying on CE mark. And there is an additional burden which is going to happen where a lot of people are not prepared yet for it, which is the re-registration in other countries based on the MDR certificate. And if everyone going to get his certificate now again in 2024, and then they go to register again in other countries, based on that certificate, the lane there will be also very long, because people will be waiting, and those authorities are not prepared for this wave coming on them.
I was looking forward to today. You certainly did not disappoint.
Thank you, Joe.
It never does.
Yes. Again, my hope, my invitation that you can join us in May. For the other folks on the line, I am going to raise prices tomorrow, so get back to me if you want to go, so I can get you in at the lower price. And administratively, we will not host our call on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, as you will all be too drunk to enjoy anything we have to share. But we will be back in January. Next week, Rob Packard. My profound thanks, Bassil. Michelle, thanks as always. Very, very festive. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Talk to you also.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.